All right, let's get the latest on the Buckeyes. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, one of the best sources for Ohio State football coverage. Of course, Tony Girdman from the ozone.net provides us with some incredible, insightful analysis on the Buckeyes year round. Tony, how you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. How are you doing, Mark?
Doing great, doing great. Would like to encourage everyone to support us on Patreon. Also, you can use the Amazon links below that you see in the description section to support the channel. Few news and notes regarding recruiting as we head toward 2020 after what was a very quality class in regards to player ranking in 2019, but not necessarily the numbers because of the size of the class.
Yeah, a relatively small class, smallest class at Ohio State in about a decade or so. They just didn't have a bunch of guys leaving, a bunch of seniors leaving. So I think they finished around 15th or so in the rankings, but were number 3 in terms of ranking per recruit. So yeah, they got the quality. They didn't necessarily get the quantity, but they got they couldn't just go and oversign. That's not what Ohio State does. The Big Ten won't allow it. So you get what you can. You really have to focus down, and because when you only have like 17, 16 spots, then you're really paring things down. So you're not casting a huge net and just trying to bring everybody in. You focus more. So that's what they did. And now they've heading into 2020 where they'll have a bigger class. They'll have more seniors departing after this season. I mean, last year they had one senior on defense, which gives you an idea of just how many non-seniors they had and how many seniors they didn't have. So, you lose a couple of starters on defense, early to the NFL, and now you've got to start to replace them through, and that won't be this coming recruiting class, but the 2019 class, we'll see what they can do. Really, though, there haven't been a lot of true freshmen doing things at Ohio State because the recruiting classes have been so good that there's talent in front of them, basically. So there's quite a bit of redshirting going on, which is another reason why there wasn't a lot of guys leaving last year.
As we look toward 2020, because of the small class in 2019 and because of what you've just mentioned, a lot of seniors will be leaving. Are there particular needs that we can already see? Maybe I'm putting you on the spot here in regards to positional needs for the next class, 2020.
I think the biggest needs will be offensive line and cornerback. Now, they closed well on the offensive line on signing day, got a couple of guys. They got a grad transfer from Rutgers and Jonah Jackson, so that will help. But cornerbacks, they did not sign any corners in the 2019 class. So they'll have to bring in a bunch in 2020, 3 or 4 or 5, just because 1 or 2 of those guys will move to safety maybe. So you'll just bring in as many as you can. I know that they're in on some of the top guys. They've had guys come in, they've had guys visit. So there's, they're going to be, that wide net I talked about. They're going to want a bigger boat for the corners in 2020. Offensive line, they're still going to have to get as many as they can to continue to build that up. And one area to watch out for is quarterback. They've got their 2020 quarterback committed in Jack Miller, but they still don't have as many quarterbacks on scholarship as Ryan Day wants. And if, as quarterbacks do when they don't win a job, if they transfer out, now you're taking another quarterback away from Ohio State. If whoever loses the job maybe wants to leave after the season, then now you're even thinner. And do you want to take a second quarterback? Maybe, but does that upset your current commit at quarterback? Yes. And now you've got to balance all of that. So a lot of fun for Ryan Day and all of his assistant coaches and trying to make these 17-year-olds happy.
And Ohio State fans, don't be alarmed by taking a player from Rutgers. So we know that it was the worst Power 5 team in the nation, but from everything I understand, he was arguably the best offensive lineman in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and he was better than either of Ohio State's 2 guards last year. So he's a rough guy. He's a finisher. He's aggressive. He's what Ohio State needs and what they didn't really have last year. So I think he'll fit in. He can play center as well. Ohio State is replacing all 3 of their interior starters. So wherever his versatility will allow them to put the best 5 together. And if the best 5 is him at center, then that's great. If the best 5 is him at guard, that's great too. And if he isn't good enough to start, now he's a quality sixth man.
All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, commenting on the Buckeyes. We got Tony Girdman on the line from the ozone.net. Tony does a great job right there. We get a sampling of his work right here at Mark Rogers TV. We're on Patreon. Please support us there, as well as grab the Amazon links to support the channel that you see down below. You don't need to buy the product, just use the link. All right, now we get to the portion of the offseason that I kind of detest, because it's become a factor in news, and I use the term lightly, reporting and sports reporting by extension, and that's that you start to speculate on somebody else's speculation, and then maybe that's attached to a rumor. I saw a what we call a topic bar in TV on one of the networks the other day that was involving an NBA rumor. So we start with a rumor, and then it was a reaction to somebody else's reaction about the rumor. That's what it actually read on the topic bar. It's come to that. Not quite in that ballpark, but still, when you look at Heisman Trophy odds, it's basically somebody's projection of how somebody's going to vote eventually, and are discussing what we think of their projection on somebody's vote, which isn't even the vote doesn't tell us that that player is definitely the best player in the country. It's just a popularity poll to a certain extent, or an evaluation of a season. So it's a bit silly, but that's what we do during the longest off season in sports, college football, is we got to talk about this stuff. So we got the Westgate Las Vegas Superbook saying that Tua Tagovailoa is at plus 250. So if you're not into betting, that means you need to lay $100 to win 250 net. So it's a 5-2 odds for Tua. Then you got Trevor Lawrence at 3-1. Then you've got an interesting threesome with Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields, 2 transfers. And then Adrian Martinez, I'm surprised to see at 6-1, despite his talent at Nebraska, having only played about half a season there. So Justin Fields, of course, popping up at 6-1. The talent would say, hey, he should be rated that highly, and the talent now around him at Ohio State and the opportunities should all play into something that reflects 6-1. Sounds pretty reasonable.
As we talked about it, it does sound reasonable, assuming Justin Fields is the starter and assuming he wins the job. You look at what Dwayne Haskins did last year, throwing for 5,000 yards. Now you bring in Justin Fields, who some say is, obviously he can throw the ball, he can run the ball. Now are you talking a 4,000-yard passer, 800 yards rushing? If you do that, you're going to be in New York. And that's, I think, what an Ohio State quarterback can do if he's as good as people think or as people say, because there's going to be plenty of offense at Ohio State under Ryan Day, but he still has to win the job. People assume that he is going to be outstanding, and he may be, but he is one of a number of mysteries about Ohio State this year, where if everything falls in line, they could win a national title. If all of these assumptions end up being, 50-50 and not quite as good, then now you're talking, 10-2. I mean, even say worst case scenario is 10-2. That's a bit outlandish as well. But I think if he's the starter, the numbers are going to be there, and he's got a better arm than JT Barrett. Can run. He's faster. JT Barrett is a quality runner in what he was asked to do, reading, getting that extra yard, picking up those short yardage. I don't expect that from Justin Fields. What I would expect is more scrambles for 30 yards, stuff like that. And just keeping the defense honest with his ability to read the option, run that zone read, which they didn't do last year. So if he's the starter, he's going to put up some numbers. He's got the Ohio State backing. He'll have the hype, which, we saw Tua had the hype last year, and it carried him all the way until the end when somebody came in from, Kyler Murray came in sort of down the stretch and took it from him. So he's going to, we're already talking about him. So he has the hype, and he's played 12 games as a true freshman in garbage time. So here we are.
And Kyler Murray, by the way, was 20-1 to start the season at this point last year. So it's not necessarily the guy going into it, but more so than any other award, major sports postseason award, there is a a setting up. There is a stage to be set where they almost give us the candidates, and then you really have to play from behind. Be a running back that runs for 2,200 yards, or a passer who comes out of nowhere to put yourself out there, or you have to completely lose it in the other way to drop yourself off the map. As opposed to NFL MVP, we just vote on whomever. There's not like a list of candidates to start the season.
Yeah, the way I would equate it is, you've got like Tua and Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields are basically, like Wheel of Fortune at the end. You get the RSTLNE. That's those guys. And then it's up to the winner to pick the letters that, ends up spelling out the rest of the puzzle. And like you said, coming from behind and coming out of the picture into the picture where you maybe catch some people off guard and surprise them. But because we've seen how many times where a guy is leading forever and you think he's a shoe-in, be it Geno Smith a few years back. I mean, half the season and there was nobody else in contention, and by the end of it, it's like Geno who. So, we'll see who can. It'll be interesting to watch who comes from behind and puts themselves into that picture. And I would think Adrian Martinez would be one of those guys, except he's already in the picture, and I think that's a little early. But I do have high expectations for him.
So if we stay on the same campus, then we go back to 2014. If he would have completed the season, JT Barrett was not the starter, of course. So 1 week to the start of the season, ended up throwing, I believe, 34 touchdown passes and running for whatever it was, 13 or 14 more, and had one of the most prolific seasons in Big Ten history. Was the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. I don't know where he finished in the Heisman. I would guess he finished in the top 6 or 7, something in that range. So Matthew Baldwin goes from somewhat obscurity to one play away if things unfold in the quarterback race the way we anticipate them to. And this is a kid that the thing that comes to mind with Matthew Baldwin when his name is brought up is the comment made by Urban Meyer. I believe it was after the Penn State game, the big comeback 2 years ago, 39-38, in which he was asked about Matthew Baldwin for some reason, or something came up in which he was talking about Ryan Day being so excited about seeing Matthew Baldwin on tape that he rushed in to talk to Urban and made him watch tape on Matthew Baldwin as they were preparing for Penn State. And Urban Meyer's like, "Are you crazy?" And he's like, "You got to watch this kid," because it was like Thursday night before the Saturday Penn State game. And so Matthew Baldwin is obviously at Ohio State, and he's most likely going to be the number 2 quarterback.
Yeah, and he was a guy who was at Lake Travis in Austin, Texas, huge high school, sat for 3 years behind quarterback at Baylor now, Charlie Brewer.
Yes.
Maybe. So he started one season, started his senior season in high school, was committed to Colorado State before the season started. And then he starts playing and starts blowing up. And, by that point, a lot of the schools like Ohio State, they already have their quarterback in that class. Ohio State had their quarterback, Emory Jones, committed, maybe like a year before. And obviously he eventually decommits and goes to Florida. But before he decommitted, they went and offered Matthew Baldwin and basically said, "We like Baldwin better." And so they, put all of their chips in the Baldwin basket. Yeah, but blew him away with their throwing when Ryan Day went to see him throw. He ends up tearing an ACL in the state playoffs, I think in the semifinals, tried to play in the finals and couldn't, and hurt his knee even more. So this past, last spring, he was doing some throwing, couldn't really do anything other than that. But even just doing that, he was impressing his teammates. Paris Campbell said he's absolutely not like some throw-in guy. He's a legit quarterback. Don't think of him as just some stopgap. We need depth. That's not who he is. And, talking to him, we talked to him at the Rose Bowl, and Justin Fields was rumored to be headed to Ohio State at that point. And this was, the same, I guess, a couple days after, like Tate Martell says, "I'm not afraid of anybody. I'm going to be the starting quarterback next year. I'm not going anywhere." And we talked to Matthew Baldwin after the Rose Bowl, and he was like, "You're going to come to Ohio State. There's going to be competition. So, I welcome it. If he comes, he comes. That's great, but I'm still going to prepare." And this is even before Dwayne Haskins said he was leaving for the NFL. He's like, "I'm going to prepare to be the starter next year, whether Dwayne is here or not." And so that's his mindset. You know, he sat for 3 years in high school. I asked him if he was tired of sitting. You know, are you tired of being patient? And he's like, you know, I'm just a patient guy, but I would rather be on the field. So it's going to be, if you think like Justin Fields is 2 and done, then that would still give Matthew Baldwin 2 years of starting. And if Ryan Day is this producer of top 10 picks, then there would be a reason to stay around and be patient with that as well, especially if Justin Fields is the next. And now it seems like, you know, Ohio State is maybe trending towards a quarterback you might stick around a little bit longer to be part of that. So, you know, he's mobile enough. He's got a strong arm. He's more like JT Barrett than Justin Fields is. So you know, Ryan Day will design the offense around the quarterback and the players around him. So as Ryan Day says, it's the same offense. JT Barrett ran the same offense as Dwayne Haskins. They look completely different, but that's because the emphases would be different depending on the quarterback. So I think he is very underlooked or overlooked, I guess you would say. And people would get excited about Justin Fields for good reason. I don't think that I think Matthew Baldwin would be just fine. And long answer, short answer, I think he would be just fine as the starter.
Tony, we have you on here for the long answers. As long as they're good, they're good
Yeah,
answers.
exactly.
So we have you back all the time because we don't mind the long answers because they make sense, and they give us a lot of insight. So I would ask anybody out there who questions that it's always going to be in a situation like this: Justin Fields, who was the number 1 quarterback in the country, versus Matthew Baldwin, who I don't remember his ranking. I've looked it up at some point. Was
just a guy
25 or something like that. Just go through any position, but go to quarterback and pick a year. Just pick any year. And obviously the talent evaluation is good. And so generally the very elite players are going to be somewhere close to the top. And then but it's not going to take you long to find like, oh, that guy was a 4th rated quarterback. He's never seen the field. He's no good. The 7th rated quarterback, he's awful. Or he didn't play or whatever. And quarterback number 28. He's a star. Or, you know, you're going to see guys. I remember JT Barrett's number just sticks in my head. I think it was 33rd in the country. And so you're going to see very good college quarterbacks, sometimes elite quarterbacks who were 25th, 30th at their position. And you're going to see guys in the top 5 and 10 that disappeared.
Look at Baker Mayfield. You know, had to walk on at 2 different schools.
Yes. Baker Mayfield and Zach Annexstad now are on the same line in regards to a trivia question. Zach Annexstad, if you don't know, was the Minnesota quarterback walk-on true freshman who started the only 2nd Power 5 starter as a true freshman, game 1. Tony Gerdeman on the line talking Ohio State football from the ozone.net. Please join him there. Support my channel by going to Patreon, also grabbing one of the Amazon links you see below and shopping at Amazon. Got the NFL Combine coming up. Got 10 Buckeyes there. Obviously, scarlet and gray all over the field. They're in Indianapolis each and every February and March at the Combine. Are there any particular storylines here? Or guys that you think are more intriguing to see how they'll perform rather than other guys?
Well, there's a couple answers there. I'm glad that Nick Bosa is healthy enough to be able to do everything and that he's going to do everything. And I'm happy that Dwayne Haskins is going to throw the ball. I mean, that's what the number 1 quarterback should do. What I'm interested in seeing is what the receivers end up doing. You know, Terry McLaurin had a great Senior Bowl week. I mean, he was a late add to the Senior Bowl, ended up being one of the top 2 receivers there. He's an athlete. He's fast. I'm interested to see how he times, how he jumps, how he moves up the boards based on that, and also his interviews. Paris Campbell is a guy who takes it personally when people don't believe how fast he is and how, you know, when he sees websites rank the fastest players in college football, and he's not on it. At one point this season, there was a tweet from someplace listing the college football's fastest players, and I don't know if he wasn't on it or was like dead last or whatever. And he had a T-shirt printed up with that graphic on it, and you know, was wearing it to interviews one day. So this is a guy, you know, Kendall Sheffield, a cornerback at Ohio State, also ran track for Ohio State, set the indoor school record in the 60 meters. And I asked Paris Campbell, who is faster than you two? And he almost took offense to it because he just doesn't like to be doubted as to how fast he is. So I want to see how fast he is. Does he run under a 4.4? And he's another guy that's going to time well. He'll be 6'1", probably over 200 pounds, unless he's dropped weight to be faster. His big thing will be how well he catches the ball. And I keep thinking about, when the receivers run across the field and they're doing this and catching all of these footballs flying at him. How well does he do in it? I think that's not his forte. And so if he can nail that would let people know that he has been working on that, which he has, but you still have to show it. He didn't get the ball deep as much this year, so we'll see how he does there. But I'm interested to see how those receivers do for sure.
The one thing that the NFL has not thought through in regards to that drill, and it just hit me just now as you were turning from side to side, are those guys really catching and securing the ball and making a football move before they drop it to the ground? Are those even catches?
You're right. You know what? They might have to revisit that because there are no football moves in that. It's a split second, and then they're just unless this, this is the football move as they drop it. But you make a good point. Write a letter.
Tony Gerdeman on the line from the Ozone talking Ohio State football as the Buckeyes. Some of them have moved on to the NFL round of preparation for the NFL draft, and others obviously still in Columbus playing for the Big Ten champions, number 3 team in the country at 13-1. One other thing, Tony, as we head towards spring practice 1 week away, just kind of your overview of as you approach it. Obviously, news is going to break, news is going to come out. People are unfortunately going to get nicked up, and that becomes the news. But as you start out, what are you thinking about, and what's going to catch your eye, or what are you looking for initially?
Well, with Ryan Day taking over, the entire Ohio State beat is hoping for more access to practice. Let us watch more than 15 minutes, please. So that I'm looking for the 16th minute mostly. Can we watch beyond the initial stretching? So, but other than that, obviously it starts at quarterback. You want to see how Justin Fields and Matthew Baldwin do. But then there's also the possibility of a scheme change defensively, more to like what Michigan does in terms of a hybrid linebacker. So there's interest in seeing what that looks like if that's happening. Are they moving in a safety to be that linebacker? And is it, starting safety like Brendan White, which then alters the entire secondary? How do you move all of these parts around him? So things like that. And then also, for me, I think the biggest question is the linebackers, because I know they were not good last year. They weren't great the year before, but these can't all be recruiting misses. So I want to see the linebackers without Bill Davis, the linebackers coach there. He's gone. Greg Schiano, defensive coordinator, is gone. I want to see these linebackers with a clean slate. Let them play in a system that allows them to do what they do best, rather than trying to, all of these square pegs and round holes. And when I don't know if I mentioned this on the show, when Bill Davis gave his final goodbye speech to his linebackers as he was leaving and moving on to the NFL, he told his guys that you will never play in a more complicated defense than this. And these are college guys, playing in a defense that was unnecessarily complicated. And I wrote a couple of days ago that Greg Schiano, as the defensive coordinator, had no positions to coach, so maybe he had too much time on his hands throughout the week, and he's devising all of these bells and whistles that the defense could do, rather than just keeping things simple. Because each of the last 2 years, towards the second half of the season, he would have to simplify things because it wasn't working. So he was asking guys to do too much, asking them to do things they couldn't, so he had to simplify it. Things got a little bit better. It didn't really get better last year, even though we talked like they did, or they talked like they did. They still, you're giving up 51 points to Maryland. Let's slow down on, things are getting better. So I want to see the linebackers with a clean slate. There's a ton of guys there. They can't all be average.
So recruiting arguably the best players in the country, and then asking them to play in a complicated defense where they can't just, run on instincts, and then letting them know that they might be playing in a more complicated defense than they will when they get to the next level, even.
Yeah, and now you see why like Greg Schiano goes to the NFL, where he can go ahead and do what he wants to do when players have 80 hours a week to devote to it rather than 20 hours a week in college and in practice and film study and things like that. You're asking too much of guys, and you saw the results. When any little mistake and the guy has gone 90 yards, that's not a great scheme.
Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, theozone.net. Please join him, the rest of the staff right there for Ohio State football coverage that ranks right up near the top. Tony, we appreciate you stopping by. Hopefully we can have you back soon and we can start breaking down some positional units.
Absolutely. It's spring football is 1 week away, and time to start talking about that rather than maybe like the Heisman or the Lozman, all of that good stuff.